I wasn't over the moon about the prospect of a AAA Indiana Jones game before starting The Great Circle. A new MachineGames joint, now that's something I'd hang my hat on, but Dr. Jones? How many stories could there be left to tell about the Connecticut-based archaeologist named after Illinois' weird little neighbor? Well, it turns out he had at least one damn good video game left in the tank. MachineGames' finest to date in a Batman Arkham tier, who knew a licensed game about this guy could be this good? Rather than the dual-wielding ultra-violence of Wolfenstein, The Great Circle is all about more brand-appropriate hand-to-hand brawling, exploration, and puzzle solving. There are guns, but limited ammo makes them more situational tools. I only ever used Indy's trusty revolver to help take down a particularly meddlesome boss. Of The Great Circle's 4 pillars, the exploration is Indy's ace in the hole, while the rest range from situationally tolerable to pretty fun. This game can be a bit wonky, but the overall experience, the immersion, atmosphere, and sense of fun are greater than the sum of its parts, with the magic and believability of MachineGames' vision of the 1930s and The Great Circle's fantastic storytelling carrying the day. I'm reminded of how the Elder Scrolls games have bad stealth, bad combat, samey dungeons, and uneven skill systems, but they sell a fictional world so well, so completely, they're still some of the best RPGs around. In a preview of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, PC Gamer editor Robin Valentine worried it would wind up being just a mediocre stealth game. I'd go so far as to say it's a bad stealth game, with the saving grace being that the sneaking about Solid Snake style is only core to a few story missions, while it can be minimized in the side stuff. The Great Circle has simple, line-of-sight stealth, without much in the way of sound propagation, visibility control, silent range takedowns, or tools for keeping track of enemies. None of that stuff is particularly Indiana Jones, but only one of the Great Circle's stealth levels feels tailor-made to these limitations. A nighttime infiltration of Rome's Castel Sant'Angelo, covered in Robin's preview, feels fit to task. With close quarters, limited numbers of guards, and lots of vertically oriented alternate paths well out of their sightlines. The other pure stealth sequences later on are decidedly not that, with tons of enemies whose crisscrossing lines of sight preclude picking them off one by one, while the levels simultaneously lack reliable alternate paths around those guards. One main mission in particular felt like a base lifted straight out of Metal Gear Solid 5, but with less than half of that game's information and tools at my disposal. These sections absolutely sucked, and I found myself just crouch walking through them as quickly as possible, ignoring any side content and keeping my fingers crossed that none of the guards' "Hey, I see you!" meters would fill up completely as I passed. Thankfully, there are only a few mandatory examples of these in the game, and stealth can otherwise be minimized through the Great Circle's disguise system. It's not Hitman, but it works well enough. Each open-world hub has 2 disguises. One you get at the beginning that allows access to most of the zone, and another, hidden costume that lets you walk freely in restricted areas. In the Vatican, Indy starts with that priest outfit and can upgrade to an Italian fascist black shirts uniform, which feels very weird to say out loud. You've seen the brawling here before in better and worse form. You can punch and counter enemies, with a super generous parry window, meaning the fights are fairly fun and easy without wearing out their welcome. On the second hardest difficulty, I only had real trouble with some optional boxing prize fights against the fascist heavyweight champion of Italy and the strongest Nazi who ever lived. I kept getting up again and again for rematches like a brave Glassjaw in an old cartoon, drastically increasing Indy's risk of developing chronic traumatic encephalopathy. In the great video game scale of BioWare Tower of Hanoi puzzle on the simple end to Void Stranger or Day 1 Destiny raid at most complex, the Great Circle's brain teasers are just barely upper middle class, like a notch above Uncharted. Something I really appreciated was just how many little puzzles there were. Most side quests involve some puzzle solving or navigational challenges of some kind, and I absolutely had more fun with that than yet more base clearing or whatever else most open worlders have us doing these days. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is organized around 3 acts with their own open-world hubs, with more linear, set-piece missions stringing them together, and the design of these levels is the real triumph of the game. The more open-ended areas have the density, inspired design, and feels like a real-place magic of a Deus Ex hub or Dishonored map, and I found exploring them to be a pure joy. Indy gets a range of different objectives in the hub zones, with your main story quest front and center, a selection of 3 or so story and cutscene heavy side quests that are virtually indistinguishable from the main stuff in terms of production values, and then a wide array of bite-sized mysteries or one-off little side puzzles whose stories are mostly told through notes and other clues in the environment. Vatican City is the peak of the game for my money. It's a visual feast, all sumptuous Renaissance interiors, including a digital facsimile of the Sistine Chapel, and towering architecture over sunny, cobbled streets. It 100% feels like there was an Assassin's Creed level of historical research and budget poured into the Great Circle's environments. The urban density of Vatican City also really works in its favor compared to the other 2 hubs, which have more of a sprawl to them. Vatican looks like it has a small footprint based on its map, but then you're climbing up and down buildings, crisscrossing through shortcuts, or popping out of windows to shimmy to hard-to-reach areas. The hub zones also reward exploration beyond formal quests. Money and ancient relics that Indy is ostensibly returning to their rightful homes are liberally scattered among the tasteful environment clutter and in all sorts of secret chambers or other nooks and crannies. I found a thief-like appeal to waiting until guards' backs returned to hoover up everything worth taking. They unfortunately didn't have terminals to hack into and read other people's emails on back in 1937, but the Great Circle provides the analog version of that voyeuristic immersive sim thrill with inter-office memos and fascists' diaries for Indy to purloin. For the climactic bits of the game, the Great Circle does console-style, minimally interactive wow factor set pieces better than maybe any game I've played. I usually don't even go for that sort of thing. I like RPGs and systemic interactions and other crusty PC gaming things. Substance, not flash. But the Great Circle had scenes that were so imaginative and surprising I was 100% on board. An early one sees Indy catching a ride on a departing Zeppelin by hooking it with his trusty whip, followed by a short sequence of climbing and ledge shimmying on the outside of the dirigible as Rome sprawls below you. It's rad as hell, and things only get more wild from there.
Enjoying the view?
Excuse me, Father...
Gallagher, is spying on people part of your daily nun routine, sister?
Troy Baker's turn as Indy is killer. He can say he wasn't trying to impersonate Harrison Ford, but I would have confused him for the real thing if I didn't know better.
And I hope you find your sister, but I work best on my own. Where's my hat?
He's here.
Beyond that, he just gives a phenomenal performance that nails Indy's easy, everyman concealing academic charisma. I'm usually against the digital de-aging / necromancy thing. Qualitative issues aside, I feel like it speaks to how stunted we've gotten culturally. We apparently can't make new movie stars and have to reheat the old ones. But I'll make an exception here and just hope that Harrison Ford is getting a big fat check in the mail for it.
And, what do you think now?
The rest of the cast is similarly full of winners, but I'd like to make special mention of the late, great Tony Todd's turn as one of the game's antagonists. This may be one of his final performances, and he just oozes menace, but also a mysterious dignity and gravitas as the 8-foot-tall man who kickstarts the adventure.
Life is precious, even yours.
MachineGames remains the industry leader at making new kinds of sneering Nazi freaks who twirl their proverbial mustaches while declaring, "Oh ho, you sentimental fool, but it is I who has the upper hand." There's this awful fascist sympathizing priest who serves as your Act 1 starter villain at the Vatican. Think a stuffy sitcom principal guilty of collaboration with world historic crimes. And he winds up serving as the perfect punching bag to introduce our true villain, Voss. The freakiest, creepiest, most "I'll get you next time, Herr Jones" ass Nazi villain to ever come out of MachineGames' R&D skunkworks. You want to punch the guy and shove him down a hill the second he shows up on screen.
Gina?
The Great Circle is an odd duck to be sure, combining immersive sim level design with set-piece spectacles that put Call of Duty or the Sony first-party stable on notice. Incredible graphical technology and AAA polish with some truly baffling and idiosyncratic design choices. Despite, and at least partially because of that funkiness, it's one of my favorite releases of this year and a new outing from a favorite studio that was well worth the wait.